Greetings. Welcome to Dr. English's Book Lovers Book Club. I'm Dr. English and I teach English. This week, I'm going to review Stephen Chbosky's The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And this is the 20th anniversary edition. This is a book that I asked for in my local library and they did not have it. And I was really pleased when I got the text that they did get it, and they bought a brand new copy of it. So I'm really pleased about that. I have, this is just, I could not put this down, I have to say. And it's one of those that you're just so involved with Charlie that you just want to keep reading to know, well, what is going to happen next in Charlie's life? Because Charlie's life is really complicated. And this is a book that just basically, it's like, it's just so heart-wrenching and so Charlie's so genuine. You just feel like, I'd like to know this, Charlie. I would have loved to have him as a friend, even though he's such a wallflower. He really is. He's just terrified of so many things. And he'd just as soon like disappear into the wall. But he's brilliant. That's the thing about Charlie. He's so brilliant and he's so caring. He does the most, what I would consider, intentional things with everyone he gets to know. And it's just beautifully done. You can't help but fall in love with Charlie. I just absolutely love this book. The one thing that it reminded me of as I was reading through it is that it is really the Catcher in the Rye of the 1990s. I absolutely love The Catcher in the Rye. I love Holden Caulfield. I love the voice, that J.D. Salinger conveyed through Holden Caulfield. And so Charlie reminds me really a lot of Holden Caulfield. It's very similar kind of, it's his narrative voice. He's talking about the world. He has, some people say like, he's cynical about the world, but really it's kind of innocent too. And I could just hear Holden, he and, Charlie would have been best friends. So to me, this is like the Holden Caulfield of the 90s. And so it has that. If you love Catcher in the Rye, you will love Perks of Being a Wallflower. Although the things about Charlie, some of the things that have happened in his life are very disturbing. And so, but, I think Stephen Chbosky did a good job of handling it in such a delicate way because they're all letters. They're like written by letters, dear friend, by Charlie. And so that takes away some of the shock of things. And, but still people would be surprised by some of the things that happen. But I also think it's very authentic. Like things like that happen in this world. And so in that regard, I think, you can't read this and not really just fall in love with Charlie because he's just so genuine and innocent about everything in his life, and just how he sees the world. And then it was such a surprise that he is really a very, an incredible fighter, physically, and you would not think that, because he's not, you don't get the impression he's very big. But he is. He's scarily strong in that regard. And so I'm going to read to you. It was so hard for me to choose the passages for this book because there's so many pieces in here that I wanted to read. But then I thought, can't read that because I just didn't want to do any spoilers for anybody who has not read this book. So I'm going to read a piece from the very beginning and then, more towards the middle a little bit. There's a funny scene or it's kind of funny, but it's also like, Charlie, what were you thinking? So I love this. To Charlie, and the whole group said, to Charlie, I didn't know why they did that, but it was very special to me that they did, especially Sam, especially her. I would tell you more about the homecoming dance, but now that I'm thinking about it, me letting out the air of Dave's tires was the best part. I did try to dance like Bill suggested, but I usually like songs you can't dance to, so I didn't do too much. Sam did look very pretty in her dress, but I was trying not to notice because I'm trying not to think of her that way. I did notice that Brad and Patrick never talked once during the whole dance because Brad was off dancing with a cheerleader named Nancy, who is his girlfriend, and I did notice that my sister was dancing with a boy she wasn't supposed to, even though a different boy picked her up at the house. After the dance, we left in Sam's pickup Patrick was driving this time, and as we were approaching the 4-pit tunnel, Sam asked Patrick to pull to the side of the road. I didn't know what was going on. Sam then climbed in the back of the pickup, wearing nothing but her dance dress. She told Patrick to drive, and he got this smile on his face. I guess they had done this before. Anyway, Patrick started driving really fast, and just before we got to the tunnel, Sam stood up, and the wind turned her dress into ocean waves. When we hit the tunnel, all the sound got scooped up into a vacuum, and it was replaced by a song on the tape player, a beautiful song called Landslide. When we got out of the tunnel, Sam screamed this really fun scream, and there it was, downtown. Lights on buildings and everything that makes you wonder. Sam sat down and started laughing. Patrick started laughing. I started laughing. And in that moment, I swear we were infinite. Love always, Charlie. I love the idea of feeling infinite. And that was a moment with Patrick and Sam. It was kind of a funny scene where Charlie thought they were dating, and then they started laughing, and they said, no, we're brother and sister. They're stepbrother and stepsister. And it was just a funny scene. So they become a trio, those three. They're together all the time. And so that was a really fun time for them. But this is another an instance where it wasn't so fun. So I'm going to read this. They go to do the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and they reenact it, and everybody takes a particular part, and I love that too. It's just like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's just there's so much good stuff in here. So after the show, Craig invited us all back to his apartment to drink wine and listen to the White Album. After the record was over, Patrick suggested we all play Truth or Dare, a game that he loves to play when he's buzzed. Guess who chose dares over truth all night? Me. I just didn't want to tell Mary Elizabeth the truth because of a game. It was working pretty well most of the night. The dares were things like chug a beer, but then Patrick gave me a dare. I don't even think he knew what he was doing, but he gave it to me anyway. Kiss the prettiest girl in the room on the lips. That's when I chose to be honest. In retrospect, I probably could not have picked a worse time. The silence started after I stood up, since Mary Elizabeth was sitting right next to me. By the time I had knelt down in front of Sam and kissed her, the silence was unbearable. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was friendly, like when I played Rocky and she played Janet, but it didn't matter. I could say that it was the wine or the beer that I chugged. I could also say that I had forgotten the time Mary Elizabeth asked me if I thought she was pretty. But I would be lying. The truth is that when Patrick dared me, I knew that if I kissed Mary Elizabeth, I would be lying to everyone, including Sam, including Patrick, including Mary Elizabeth. And I just couldn't do it anymore, even if it was part of a game. After the silence, Patrick did his best to salvage the mean evening. The first thing he said was, well, isn't this awkward? But it didn't work. Mary Elizabeth walked quickly out of the room and into the bathroom. Patrick told me later that she didn't want anyone to see her cry. Sam followed her, but before she completely left the room, she turned to me and said, serious and dark, what the is wrong with you? It was the look on her face when she said it, and how much she meant it. It suddenly made everything seem like it really was. I felt terrible, just terrible. Patrick immediately stood up and took me out of Craig's apartment. We walked to the street, and the only thing I was aware of was the cold. I said I should go back inside and apologize. Patrick said, no, I'll get our coats. Just stay here. When Patrick left me outside, I started to cry. It was real and panicky, and I couldn't stop it. When Patrick came back, I said, really crying, I think I should go apologize. Patrick shook his head. Believe me, you don't want to go in there. Kind of, I guess, Charlie and Mary Elizabeth were dating. But Charlie has his eyes for Sam and Sam only, always, through the whole book. But he starts dating Mary Elizabeth because Sam had a boyfriend. And so, yeah, he really is crazy about Sam. And this was just, it's funny but sad and very poignant that, you know, he just was being honest and kissed the prettiest girl, according to him. But if he hadn't had a little wine and beer, he may have thought that would have been a bad choice. But then he might have been stuck with Mary Elizabeth. She never stopped talking. So I kind of feel for him. I don't know that I would teach this book in school. I know I have a former high school student named Zach who is teaching it, and he loves this book, and so I give him a shout out to Zach on this book. But just revisiting it, I'm just thinking there are so many issues in this that are really really difficult issues to come to terms with in this novel. And so I think you could teach it, but you definitely have to like send home a note to parents. I think it's one of the most censored books. But I mean, there's suicidal ideation, there's incest, there's um, there's a lot of language. There's teenagers being teenagers, and so but in that way, it's just like, well, it would be appeal to kids because it is so realistic and authentic. And so, but I would definitely, make sure you made parents aware of it and sent home some kind of release kind of thing. Definitely feel like you should have it on your shelf. I definitely think you could do it in a small group situation, a book club, but also even with the book club, I would really tread lightly about that and send home some kind of note about this being offered as a book club. Or like me, when I did novel panels, I had a list of all the books that students can pick off my shelf that were groups of 4 or 5 books, and note in bold that these are considered R-rated books and do not choose them if this is something that your parents or family, they wouldn't allow you to do those things, to see those kind of movies. So unless you get permission. And so parents would have to sign off on that syllabus that they had read it and read that. So if a student did pick it without, a parent gets upset, you can always say, well, you signed off on this, that you understood this. In that regard, it's so beautifully written. So I mean, I suppose back in the 1960s, people probably complained about Catcher in the Rye for same thing, just not quite as it's not graphic. It's just the level of the kinds of things that are in it are things that people, as you know, it's like taboo. We don't want to talk about that, which I think we do need to talk about that. So, but yeah, I just love this book. So I highly recommend it. I definitely think you should have it on your shelf for supplemental in your teacher library. And I think you could, your students well enough to know which student you could suggest it to. So next week, I'm going to be reviewing a very large expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi. I don't know that I pronounced that right. And so I look forward to talking to you about this book next week. This was a book from one of my, these were all from my young adult literature class. So thanks for joining me. See you next week. Bye.